So let's go ahead and get started building this game. First thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to create the set of piles. And so I'll just create a variable here called piles. And it's going to be an array. And we know we need 3 piles. And there's going to be 3, 4, and 5 sticks per pile. And while I'm here, I'm also going to create an array for the players. I know I have 2 players, and I'm going to keep their names in this array called players. And the reason I'm doing that is because I have a loop, and each player has a name that I show in the loop. And it's easier to have an index to access the player's name using an array, and I'll show you why that is here in a little bit. I need another variable called keep playing. I'll just call it keep playing. Actually, I'm going to use the underscore notation here. Seems to be in the Ruby community, the notations, camel case versus using underscore for spaces, the underscore convention seems to be the preferred naming convention. Most of the other languages out there, camel case is the preferred way of doing it. I don't really have a preference one way or the other, but I noticed that RubyMine will flag variable names. If you use camel case, it'll flag them with a little tip that says you should name this with underscores instead of throwing all the words together. So I'm going to follow their convention just to avoid getting some of those warning messages. Not a big deal, but I'll just go ahead and do that. So anyway, keep playing. I'm going to set that variable to true. So I've done that. So I've created and set the array of piles, and then I'm also going to put here initialize additional variables. So, got that. Okay, get player's first name. So I'm going to print a message here. So I'm going to use single quotes, so I don't need to embed any special characters in here. So player 1, enter your name. Notice I have a chevron and a space here. And then I'm going to call gets.chomp. And I'm going to collect the player's name and put it into the array. Players sub 0 equals gets.chomp. Chomp, of course, takes away the carriage return. So if they type in their name and they hit enter, it won't count the carriage return as they do so. So I'm going to do the same thing for the second player. So I'm going to take these 2 lines of code, copy them, paste them here, and change player 1 to 2, change that index from 0 to 1. So now I've got the code to get the players' names. Now I want to set the current player to the first player. So I'm going to say here current player equals 0. Now this is an index. So I'll make a little comment here. Variable stores index into player array. So I understand what that's for later on. Okay. In my loop, I'm going to begin with the begin statement. And then it says here, display pile counts. So what I'm going to do here is, I'm going to use, instead of single quotes, I'm going to use double quotes here because I'm going to be inserting the curly braces to embed variables inside of the string. First thing I'm going to have is a carriage return. There's a \n. Then I'm going to have a colon, space, and then I'm going to insert in piles sub 0. So I'm going to go and do my piles array, and I'm going to grab the first element and display that. Then I'm going to take B, colon, and I'm going to insert here piles sub 1, couple spaces, C colon, and then piles sub 2. And then I'm going to throw a couple character turns in just to round things out. Okay. Now notice there's a little squiggly line at the back of this thing. That's because I have a begin up here and I don't have an end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to the bottom. I'm just going to put an end here. And then if I come back up, that little red symbol goes away. I'll have to go fix that later, but it just takes care of that issue. Okay, now it says begin loop to get valid pile choice from user. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a loop control variable called pile is valid, set it to false. What that's going to do is it's going to control when I can exit the loop that's following here. So I'm going to put a begin right here, and I'm going to put an end, and I'm going to say end while not pile is valid. What that basically means here is I'm going to loop through this code, and I'm going to keep looping as long as pile is valid is false. So if pile is it's not valid, then I'm going to keep going. Once the pile is valid, this condition will be false and it will break out of the loop, and I'll go to the next loop. The next loop I build, I'm going to create a variable for that as well. And I'll call this one count is valid. Set that to false. This is asking these for the count. So I'm going to set up a loop here. And I'm going to end, and I'm going to keep looping while count is valid is false. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up my comments just a little bit here. So that I'm basically going to have a comment that says begin get valid pile choice from user, and then begin get valid stick count from user, and I'll get rid of that comment at the bottom. Okay, so first thing I want to do here is go to the first loop, the valid pile choice loop, and I'm going to print out the question, and I'm going to say here go to the players array, and I'm going to get the current player. So now current player is equal to 0 or 1. Players holds the names of the players. So this loop is going to be called and run through for both players. So current player, if it's set to 0, then players sub current player, this entire thing here, will evaluate to the name of the first player. Next time through the loop, if current player is set to 1, then I'll show the second player's name. So this is going to show the player's name here. Then I'm going to say comma, choose a pile. So player, whatever their name, choose a pile. That's my message. Then I'm going to create a variable called pile choice and set it equal to gets.chomp, and I'm going to say here uppercase. So if they type lowercase a, it'll convert it to uppercase. So they can go either way. If they do lowercase, we'll convert it to upper for them, and if they do uppercase, it'll be already there. Now it says if letter invalid, tell user to repeat. So basically, the way I'm going to set this up is as follows. If pile choice is equal to A, now notice I'm using an uppercase A here because I used uppercase to get pile choice. So if they're going to match, I need to use uppercase letters. Also notice the double equal sign, because this is an if statement. I'm asking, is the pile choice equal to A? I'm not saying set the pile choice equal to A. If that were to be true, I would have used one equal sign. But because I'm asking, I use two. So if you're asking, use two equal signs. If you're telling, use one equal sign. And I'm asking. If pile choice equals A, then pile index equals 0. That's going to be the index into the piles array. So if they want pile A, that's pile 0, essentially. Else, if they decided that they wanted pile B, then pile index will be 1 for the second pile. Remember, with arrays, they're always off by 1. Pile choice is equal to C, then pile index is equal to. And now if, here's an issue here. In Ruby, the else if is ELSIF. There's no E in it. That takes a little getting used to because in other languages, the E is in the word else. But anyway, okay. If they don't enter A or B or C, it's going to come down to the else at the bottom here. And if they get to this point, that basically means they screwed up. So I'm going to put out a message that says, carriage return, invalid choice, period. You must enter A, B, or C. And then I'll put in a couple of carriage returns at the end as well. Now, if they screw up, I'm going to set the pile index to -1. So no matter what happens through this construct here, this selection construct, no matter what path gets taken, whether it's this one here, or the else, no matter what happens, pile index is going to get set. Oh, this should be okay, no, that's right. So it's either going to be a 0, 1, 2, or -1. Now, if they screw up the pile selection, then there's no sense asking them about the count. But before we even go to that point, if they don't pick the right letter, then our next test, if letter is valid but pile is empty, tells you to choose a pile. Well, if the letter is valid, then we proceed. But if the letter is not valid, we shouldn't proceed. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say if pile index is greater than or equal to 0. In other words, if it's not -1, essentially. Okay, if it's not -1, then I'm going to go into this if statement. Okay, so if the pile index is valid, then I can check to see if the pile is empty or not. And all I have to do here is say if pile index is equal to 0, then they have selected an empty pile. So I'm going to put out a message that says, nice try, comma, and I'll put their name up for them just because it's kind of nice to see that. Nice try, and then I'm going to use player sub current player. That pile is empty. Choose another pile. Whoops. Okay, so if they screw up, if they get the right pile letter, A, B, or C, but they happen to choose a pile that's empty, then we're going to tell them that. Otherwise, we're going to say that our pile is valid is true. So basically what we're saying is, okay, we have a loop here. we're going to get the pile choice. We're going to make sure it's valid. If it is valid, we're going to check to see if the pile is empty. If it's not, then we're going to say pile is valid is equal to true. And this outer loop that starts on line 42 and ends on line 67 is going to keep going as long as pile is valid is false. So basically, the only way that you're going to be able to break out of this loop that starts on line 42 and ends on line 67 is if this line of code runs on line 64. And the only way that line 64 is going to happen is if the user enters a choice, it ends up being A, B, or C, and the pile that they chose is not empty. Then it will come to line 64, set the variable to true, it will exit out of this loop. Now we know we have a valid pile that the user has selected. And then we can move on to the next test, which is getting the count of the number of sticks they want to take out of the pile. So that'll be our next step. And we'll do that in the next video.